Welcome everyone to Buddha Center. I'm so glad to be with you all tonight to discuss Lama Tsongkhapa's Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, specifically the foundation of all good qualities, source of all my good. And I just rejoice in the fact that Namgyal Khensa Geshe Wandak Rinpoche spent so much time with many of us discussing this information, which is the key to everything we've ever wanted. So before we get started, let's imagine that we bring every sentient being in the universe here. Why are we imagining this? We know that the highest motivation that we can have, the most important mind that we can generate next to the wisdom realizing emptiness, is the mind that aspires to enlightenment. Bodhicitta, that mind that wishes to become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. And when you become enlightened, when you've removed all the negativities in your mind and their stains, you will be able to do the things that a Buddha can do, because a Buddha has perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means and power, perfect wisdom. And you will know exactly what to do. And you'll just have so much skill to be able to do it. And what the Buddhas came to this, what Buddha Shakyamuni came to this world to do, and what the Buddhas come to this world to do, is to show us how to discover the truth that they discovered, how to be able to transform our minds just like they did, from a mind that has all of these negativities like mine does, to a mind that's free. Then free from what? Free from the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience that keep me from having perfect wisdom, love, compassion, skillful means, power, etc. So the way that I can start to evolve my mind into a mind that acts like a Buddha's mind, a mind that spontaneously wants to help all sentient beings learn how to discover the truth themselves, is by laying tracks within my own mind that's in concordance with how a Buddha's mind thinks. So when we think about bringing all sentient beings here to share the gift of the Dharma with them, we think about the fact that all sentient beings, like myself, want happiness. We can concur that every single sentient being, that's every being, beings that are in the lowest hell realm, all the way up to 10th ground bodhisattvas, we can concur that all of these beings want to have happiness. Secondly, we can concur that all beings in the universe, from the lowest hell realm all the way up to the highest bodhisattva ground, want to be free from suffering. So this is a universal fact that we can come up with when we think about this. We can see that even ants, we can see that mosquitoes, are every single sentient being, looking at ourselves, looking at folks who have a lot more than us. Everyone is trying to accomplish a freedom from suffering and a place where they achieve a happiness that kind of lasts. So this is something that we all have in common if we're sentient beings. And the thing that we also have in common is that none of us are satisfied. The lowest realm hell being is not satisfied because of being tortured by the sufferings that they have to endure. And the highest level bodhisattva on the 10th bodhisattva ground is not satisfied because they haven't gotten rid of the obstructions to omniscience. They don't have perfect love and compassion and skillful means and perfect wisdom that is able to see conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously, without having the barrier of having to go into seeing emptiness directly or cognizing conventional truth. So until one is a Buddha, unless he or she is directly realizing emptiness, there is still an appearance. Even if they've seen emptiness directly, when they come out of it, there's still an appearance of true existence that doesn't disappear until one achieves the resultant ground, the bodhisoha. Even on the highest grounds, there is a switch of appearance of true existence back and forth to a non-appearance, when the bodhisattva at the highest level is switching back and forth to seeing emptiness and then seeing conventional reality. And eventually there's no gap. The Buddha is able to cognize ultimate truth simultaneous with conventional truth. So we look at all sentient beings, any being that's not a Buddha, and we can see that everyone wants happiness. Everyone wants to be free from suffering. and no one's satisfied with the position that they're in, no matter where they're at. And when we look at the progression of mankind, and humankind rather, and we look at how technology has evolved, and we look at how everything around us is a lot different than it was, say, 1,000 years ago, it's because of humans' dissatisfaction with the current state. If you look at history, we actually saw a scientific show about this. What has made, the Industrial Revolution? And then why, do we go from a place where there's just a discovery of a wheel to a place where I have an iPhone and I can contact people in India and I have, all the creature comforts that one could ever want? Why has our status as humans progressed further and further in terms of this external reality that we, make better, quote unquote? What we think better is going to make us satisfied. So we create more creature comforts and we create more things within samsara. And we create more ideas through our inappropriate attention that says, well, this next thing will be the thing that makes me happy. And if we look at history, we can prove dissatisfaction because no one, the people who have the most money in the world are always looking for the next thing that's a little bit more tech savvy or cooler than the thing that they had before. So we find just this equality of, I don't want to suffer, I want to be happy, and I'm not satisfied. So the reason that we invite all sentient beings here to be our guests, to be able to hear this teaching, is that the words of the Buddha, the teaching of the Buddha, everything the Buddha ever taught trickles down into the Lam Rim teachings. And because of the kindness of masters like Lord Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa, we can find those trickled teachings are put together in a way that we can practice them and realize them in graduated stages. We don't have to try and figure out what order we should try to evolve our mind in. We don't have to try to figure out, how would I develop renunciation and how would bodhicitta occur? Do I need to know the Four Noble Truths in order to be a bodhisattva? All of these things are clarified when we study the stages of the path to enlightenment teachings. That we look at the umbrella of it. Well, one umbrella is Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment, where it says, understand there are persons of three capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly to identify their characteristics. So the teachings for beings of three capacities, small, medium, and great, show a practitioner how he or she could evolve from a state like mine to a completely perfect state. So these teachings that are being given tonight aren't missing anything that's necessary when we look at what the Lam Rim implicitly teaches, even at its smallest level. The Lam Rim, even at its smallest level, is teaching everything found in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, as well as the great treatise on the stages of the tantric path to enlightenment. So when we're looking at a teaching on the stages of the path to enlightenment, we can be assured that it's a teaching that will help beings who are at the very entry level of spiritual discovery, all the way up to beings who are on the 10th Bodhisattva ground, because we know that it's necessary to engage in the completion stage of highest yoga tantra in order to become a Buddha, no matter what we're looking at. When we look at the perfection vehicle, it even says in the 10th Bodhisattva ground in Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way that then initiations on that 10th ground are given. So we see that we need this in order to complete our, achieve our perfect state. We need those final teachings, and those are found all within the Lam Rim tradition. So when we invite every single sentient being here, we know it's a reliable place to invite them to, because it's a place that will show them how to discover everything that they've ever needed to discover in order to achieve everything that they've ever wanted. And I'm here tonight in order to achieve everything that I've ever wanted. And the way that I can achieve everything that I've ever wanted is to recognize that cherishing myself is the more than others, and the self-grasping ignorance is what causes me to not be able to achieve my highest potential. So I'm here tonight to figure out how to reverse the self-grasping ignorance, how to reverse the self-cherishing attitude that keeps me away from what I'm seeking. So this is what we have to try to figure out. We have to try to figure out what it is that we grasp at. What is the problem with our perceptions? And then what is the problem with the self-cherishing attitude? And that's what the Buddha came to explain to us and was so clear about. And when we go about our day, not only when we're inviting sentient beings here to be our guests, we can start to use this kind of logic and reasoning to develop an equal ground, a recognition that everyone's equally important, which is the first step of equalizing and exchanging self with others. When we look at the two practices for getting bodhicitta, this beautiful mind that's the most important mind, coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness, we find those two practices of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment and equalizing and exchanging self with others. And this equalizing self with others step in the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice has this idea that all sentient beings want happiness and the causes of happiness. All sentient beings want to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Everyone has this equal dissatisfaction. We look at the way that I feel about wanting happiness. Everyone else feels that same way. So there's this equality that we can kind of generate. And when we go throughout our day, and when we, see the person who is closest to us, and then we see beings in the supermarket, we can start to identify them as, oh, this is a sentient being. It appears to be a sentient being. And they want happiness. They want to be free from suffering, and they're equally as dissatisfied. They're dissatisfied like I'm dissatisfied. Maybe not equally dissatisfied if they're a higher being, but they're dissatisfied nonetheless. So when you start to go about your day, you can kind of equalize folks. And then when you start to have a disagreement, or you find somebody who seems troubling to you, this can kind of slow, at least you remain like a piece of wood and apply this reasoning and say, okay, they're doing something, in order to try to achieve a state of satisfaction, freedom from suffering, a state of happiness. And just like I go about ways of trying to do that, and none of us are coming up with the solution, and that'll help us to generate compassion. Just kind of a tip that's given in the teachings, and Umzala Geshe Aga pointed this out to me when he was giving the teaching on the meditation section of Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So I wanted to share that with you, that you start to establish that all of these beings around you have this equality that yearns for this happiness, just like you. And then you've learned a little bit about the Four Noble Truths and the 8, 6, and 3 types of suffering. So you know what that being is going through in kind of a bigger level. And you couple that with that idea that they're trying to get to something that they're not getting at, just like you're trying to get to something that you're not getting at. It creates a more equal playing ground, and the bifurcation of, okay, this is, I'm self and that's other, and there is just nothing we have in common, because they're right now someone I don't really like the way they're acting. Then you can create something that is a connection between the two of you that is undeniable, no matter what the situation is that's going on. So this is an oral instruction given to me by one of my lamas, Umzala Geshe Aga Rinpoche, and I think that it's really a helpful thing to think about. And you'll find it throughout the texts, but when you kind of hear it told to you in a way that you can start to apply it, because a person has told it to you about how they apply it, It means something different. So when you invite all of these beings here, you bring the hell beings. It depend, and I'm not asking you to believe in the six realms of cyclic existence and you have to, think in these terms. It's just how I've been trained to think about sentient beings and how I've been trained within the Lam Rim. And I just ask you to keep an open mind because we don't know everything that is out there. We're trying to, even science say, is there life on other planets? And what would that life look like? Would that be a human life? So it starts to get kind of a gray area around things that could be out there because we've seen all of these instances throughout history where there were discoveries made that people couldn't have ever believed were possible, or beings were discovered that no one would have ever thought could look like that in the bottom of the seas and so forth. So it's just keep an open mind when the Buddha speaks of these different realms. And another way to look at it when you think of hell and hungry ghost, if those words for some reason rub you wrong because you have some kind of superimposition of another tradition or something like that, I assure you it's not the same. It's not a permanent situation as kind of presented by other traditions. But it is a suffering that's worse than suffering that you've seen with your own eyes in the human realm and the animal realm. Now, can't you imagine that there's suffering out there that's worse than you know about? I think that if you look at it from that perspective, because you can see the animals around you and you've watched the Discovery Channel and you've seen the fear in animals being eaten by larger animals and so forth, you can say that, yeah, that's a large amount of suffering. Couldn't there be worse suffering than that, that a mind could experience? So this is all that we're asking you at the entrance to kind of think about. Isn't there more suffering that's out there than you can think of that a mind could experience? And that's what you think about when you're thinking hell and hungry ghosts. And then you can get into the details that Buddha talked about the 8 hot hells, the 8 cold hells, the surrounding hells, the hungry ghosts, and what the hungry ghosts look like, and how their suffering is this insatiability, and they don't have kind of the body parts that allow them to get the stuff into them that they crave, and their mouths are too small, and the things that they crave and reach for turn into their opposites and so forth. So couldn't there be, you think about craving and wanting things and not getting them. Couldn't there be a worse state than you've ever imagined? Like the dog who wants to eat might have a big dog that always wants to eat. I want to eat, I want to eat. Couldn't there be something worse than that? Kind of fixation and inability to be satisfied. We experience it. We even said a 10th ground bodhisattva is not satisfied. So think about a worse level of dissatisfaction than you've ever had. Think about, not having the means to drink but not die, not having the means to eat but not die, and what that would feel like if that could go on and on and on and on and on. So we think about bringing beings like this here into our practice so that they can achieve happiness, they can achieve freedom from suffering, and they can be satisfied. So we're bringing then animals in. We see animals in the ocean. We see animals walking around on the land. We see birds flying in the sky and insects flying in the sky. And we see that they're all trying to find some sort of happiness, some sort of satiation. They want to be satisfied. They want to not have suffering. They try to find shelter. They try to find food. They try to not get eaten. And all beings that we see in the animal realm are just in this current, constant state of trying to search for food, trying to search for shelter, this ignorant state that really doesn't have any way to analyze anything other than this perpetual desire fulfilling situation that's never fulfilled whilst living in complete fear the entire time. We look at the animal realm and we think, oh, that's so cute. But if we really analyze what's going on there, we really analyze there's no hospital, And, there isn't for dogs and cats maybe in around here, but for the most part, when we look at the animal realm and we look at the various states and varieties of existence, we see that it's just a place of dissatisfaction and fear. And we can even see that amongst even our dogs that we have. There are more dominant dogs than the other that scare our other dog that's really nice. And then when the dogs go outside really brave, if there's something that a snake, they jump back and they're suddenly scared because they're living in fear. Because their instincts are driving them, their cravings are driving them to engage in various behaviors out of complete ignorance and not thinking things through. So we look at the states of beings and we look at them living out in the cold and we look at them living in the bottom of the ocean and being alone and watching their companions be eaten and wondering if they're next. And we think about the birds that are so cold and that are trying to fly south and that are getting caught in windmills. And we think about the animals that are birds flying into the windows because they're so ignorant they think they see another bird's reflection. Think about all these things that you can experience in your life. Animals that run across the road because they don't know to think to look both ways, and you see them on the side of the road, kind of a pile of meat that was a being who wanted happiness, wanted freedom from suffering, and wasn't satisfied. So they ran across that road out of ignorance to try to get to somewhere, to get to something that they were looking for. This is how we do meditation. This is how we use the Lam Rim to affect our minds. And when we do this, this changes our entire outlook on those beings around us. And then we think about the beings of the human realm, all of those beings that we have contact with. And as I've said in the previous teachings, as you invite beings who you're close to, you see how you really, really want them to hear this. And you invite those strangers in, how it's like, okay, they're all, come on in, everybody, come on in. The coffee's on, the teaching's going, come on in, everybody. And then you get to people that you maybe feel have kind of a trouble with. I don't mean enemies. We're not like superheroes with arch rivals. I mean those people maybe on the TV, maybe in history, those people that you find, oh, they're distasteful, and see how your mind reacts to them. If it just freely flows in the same way that if you brought friends in and your strangers in and the people you were having trouble with in, and your mind reacted the same way with an equal willingness to benefit them, then you've really made spiritual progress. The more and more it gets to this non-biased approach where you'd be ready to love and have compassion for everyone in the universe, the closer it gets to that, the closer you're getting to the steps that you'll need to take in order to become a bodhisattva. And that's amazing. Wow. We're learning exactly what we'll need to know in order to become a bodhisattva. So imagine you're bringing the human beings here, and now imagine you're bringing demigods and gods. So as I said about the lower realms that you can't see, think about, couldn't there be a higher form of happiness than the highest form of happiness that you can think of or have seen in the human realm? Couldn't there be a realm where maybe there was things just like a little bit higher and better and, just better? Couldn't there be such a place? So then we imagine all of the different realms, and then we can apply the meaning of them as we get more sophisticated and within our understanding of cyclic existence, inviting all of the demigods and gods, gods of the desire realm, gods of the form realm, gods of the formless realm, the 4 levels of the form realm and the 4 levels of the formless realm. Imagining we bring all of these beings here because all of these beings are trapped within cyclic existence. When we're talking about and then when we imagine, we're even bringing arhat here in solitary realizer, arhats here, who are not in cyclic existence, but aren't satisfied from a personal perspective. Maybe they don't completely know it, but they haven't reached their full potential as a hearer or a solitary realizer foe destroyer. So even though they have a freedom from suffering, they're free from cyclic existence, they still have this contamination because things appear truly existent conventionally. I know this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but that arhat will recognize that they are not in a state, that state of peace is an extreme, and that's not an extreme, isn't satisfaction. So invite all of those beings here too. So broaden your perspective. And when you broaden your perspective to understand that a hearer in nirvana has an extreme of peace, an extreme isn't satisfaction, then this will plant within your mind that I must follow the Mahayana path. I must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Invite them all here right now. In the language of gods, nagas, and yakshas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Laike dan ladana jinke dribunda dami ike nanda troa kunji drananji tsampa tanche kedu dagi chutento. So now that we have all sentient beings here as our guest, imagine that we all get into the 7-point Vairakana posture, just into a physical posture where we can kind of assess the clarity of our own minds and be in the most kind of conducive posture for our minds to be able to hear the Dharma, to be free of the 3 kind of pots that are our minds can be compared to. Look into the Lam Rim if you don't know what I'm speaking of, so that we can truly hear this Dharma, so we can have the wisdom arisen from hearing, so that we've heard the information that's correct, and then we have something that we can analyze that's correct, so that we can have the wisdom arisen from analysis and then apply it in meditation and have these kind of direct experiences through meditation. It all starts with the correct information. It all starts with hearing the correct information, not mixing up the information, and not missing some of the information. So we have to make sure that we have these qualities within our mind. And when we get into the 7-point Vairakana posture, it kind of tells us something. It says, hey, let's get serious. And it also then it puts our body into the best possible way in order to have a kind of calm mind. And we can sit for longer periods of time like this. And it also kind of encourages others. When we're thinking of bringing others here, it kind of influences their mind in a special way, the blessing of the Buddha. So now, while we're in this posture, imagine that the merit field begins to assemble in the space in front of us. Imagine that we see Buddha Shakyamuni in the space in front of us. Imagine we see His Holiness the Dalai Lama on a throne supported by 8 snow lions, Chenrezig in person. Imagine we see His Holiness Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, inseparable from Aryatara, in the space in front of us. Imagine we're seeing the holy beings such as Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche. Imagining we're seeing Demalocha Rinpoche, Khenso Lobsang Gyatso Rinpoche. Imagining we're seeing holy beings such as Geshe Dorje Damdula, Umzala Geshe Aga, Jeffrey Hopkins, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Genpal Drapa Rinpoche, Mahasiddhi Yeshe Tapke Rinpoche, all of these holy beings that we're so fortunate to have access to or have had access to, who came to this world to teach us the truth of suchness, to teach us how to tame our own minds, teach us how to discover what they've discovered. Not how to do it for us, how to discover what they've discovered. We're so fortunate they've come to this world. Imagine the holy beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga, and all the masters like Basubandhu and Dignaga and Dharmakirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha and Drone Tompa. All of the holy beings from the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Arya Manjushri, Arya Nagarjuna, and masters like Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti and Arya Deva and Shanti Deva and Baba Vega and Chandrashita and Kamalashila and Yanagarbha and Lama Salimpa and Lord Atisha and Drone Tompa, imagining these holy beings in the space in front of you, the holy beings of the lineage of blessings passed down from Lord Vajradhara to masters like Saraha, Imatripa, Tilopa, Naropa, Lotsawa Marpa, Jetsun Milarepa, Jagam Popa, all of these holy beings in the space in front of you. Imagine Drone Tompa passing down the Lamrim lineage to the 3 old Kadampa masters, the holy beings of the Nyingma, Padmasambhava, Longchenpa, Mipam Rinpoche, Zapatra Rinpoche, imagining the beings of the Sakya, Sakya Kunganimpo, Satya Randawa, Sakya Pandita, All of the holy beings of the Kaju lineage, Jegampopa, imagining all of the Karmapas, the holy beings of the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtapje, Jelsapje, Penchen Sanandrapa, Basuchuji Jetson, Jayan Sheba, Janjan Robi Dorje, Gonjo Jimmy Wampo, the seventh Dalai Lama, imagining all of these holy beings, Jetsumba, Purbajola, all of these holy beings in the space in front of you, highest Yoga Tantra deities, performance Tantra deities, action Tantra deities, all of the 35 Buddhas, all of the protector deities are here in the space in front of us, witnessing that we're studying the Lamrim tradition, studying exactly what they've come to the world to show us how to do, how to integrate the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni into our lives, and to go through the stages that Buddha Shakyamuni came to this world to teach that will allow us to turn from this state that we're in, to mature our minds into from the state that we're in to the maturity level of a Buddha. So imagine they're all just rejoicing and that the merit field is full of bliss upon seeing that we're here today studying the stages of the path for beings of three capacities that shows us how to put into practice in order what Buddha Shakyamuni came here to teach us when he turned the wheel of Dharma three times. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma, teaching the Four Noble Truths. The second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the perfection of wisdom, Heart Sutra. The third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the wheel of good differentiation. And how all of these teachings put together, interpretable and definitive, allow for us to traverse all of the stages of the path to Buddhahood. Think about that for a moment. We're not missing anything except application of these teachings in our lives. The Buddha left nothing out we need to know in order to have perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect power, perfect skillful means, perfect wisdom. A wisdom that knows conventional and ultimate truth, everything at the same time. The Buddha, it's right here for us to have. These realizations are right here for us. We just have to study. We have to have the wisdom arisen from hearing, the wisdom arisen from analysis, and the wisdom arisen from meditation. There's no shortcut. We have this tangled mess of self-grasping ignorance that turns into an inappropriate attention and just values things in ways that they can't possibly be valued. And we run our lives based on this misconception. We have to learn about what the misconception is. We have to know what it is that we're doing wrong over and over and over again that's causing all of our struggles. If we don't identify what the problem is, then there's no way that we can say, oh, this is what we need to do to fix it. If we don't identify what the cause of the problem is, how would we know how to fix it? So it's so important that we study and that we come to know what all of this means. We come to know what the first turning of the wheel of Dharma means. And then we come to know how to apply the second turning of the wheel of Dharma to the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. Because if we want to get rid of the origin of suffering, we're going to need a path that understands what the object of negation is. We're going to need to have an understanding when we subject things to ultimate analysis, what we're looking for. And what we're looking for when we subject things to ultimate analysis isn't the thing. It's an inherently existent thing. So the object of negation is inherent existence, not existence. And a lot of teachings are given wrong where it's taught that self is negated. There's no self. There's no person sitting here talking to you. And then people will hear these simple instructions, and then it won't really do anything to the way that your life is, because it's just another wrong idea, just like all the other wrong ideas that you have. And until you study to find out what's driving, what's What is it about the way that I perceive things? I perceive things to exist from their own side, independent of a designating consciousness. That's how I see things. That's how I see myself. I don't see that there's just subjectivity happening, a mere imputation, independence upon a basis of designation. I see things to truly exist over there and over here and everywhere. That's the natural way that things appear to me. And they should, because they appear to me through my sense consciousness that way. To have this objective existence right within the object that I can establish, some sort of self-defining characteristic that can be established, separate from a designating consciousness. And it's not until I investigate how things exist that I'll be able to come to the conclusion that they don't exist the way that they appear to me, but they do exist. So what is their mode of subsistence? How do they exist? And this is what the Buddha came to teach us. And if we can come to the conclusion that things don't exist the way that we think they do, and they exist the way the Buddha said they do, if we can conclude that incontrovertibly in our mind, then all of these disturbing states of our mind will just dissolve. But we have to understand what it is the Buddha's getting at when he says that the origin of suffering is self-grasping ignorance. So the Heart Sutra, this is something we're not going to come to the conclusion of tonight, but it's something we should really understand, that things exist. They just don't exist the way that they appear to exist inherently. They subjectively exist. They don't exist from the side of the object. It's not able to hold itself up. The self of person is not able to hold itself up. It's merely imputed in dependence on a basis of, it's merely imputed in dependence on a basis of designation among the 4 or 5 aggregates. There's a consciousness here and there's some parts here that are designated as Jeff. But if I look for Jeff in the 7 ways when we look at the analysis of the chariot, or if I look for Jeff as existing inherently within Jeff's parts among the 5 aggregates in my case, or if I look for a Jeff that exists inherently separately from these parts, my body and consciousness, there's not an inherently existent Jeff that I can find. I can find something that's imputed in dependence upon a collection of 4 or 5 aggregates, but I'm not able to find something that intrinsically exists within my parts or outside of my parts. And it's my natural mode of being, my natural mode of experience is that there's something findable that I'm defending, that I'm cherishing, more than anything else in this world. And there's a way that I relate to it because of believing that it has this kind of mode of existence that it doesn't. There's this thing that's created called inappropriate attention. And then there's certain things that are pleasant and certain things that are unpleasant. And then from those kinds of ways of relating to things I think inherently exist, like self of person and self of phenomena, then I kind of value things as pleasurable, unpleasurable, or neutral, and then I respond accordingly. And those neutral things that I don't seem to, care about so much are just lying in wait because I think they inherently exist to be kind of turned in by my mind into something that I don't like or I like. So in dependence upon things I find pleasurable, I'm drawn to them. In dependence upon things that I find unpleasant, I push them away. And neutral things I leave just as they are and believe they inherently exist. So you see how the coarse afflictions come about from this kind of self-grasping ignorance that then gives rise to an idea that things inherently have qualities that then I should pay attention to. And I should really, really, they should matter to me because they're jumping out like a sign from the side of the object, from the side of the self of person or self of phenomena. I feel there's a signpost saying, this is something pleasant. This is something unpleasant. But this has just been created by my mind saying that there's something truly established that exists from its own side that's able to hold itself up in a way that I'm deciding that it does as a pleasant thing that holds itself up or an unpleasant thing that holds itself up. And now I have a concrete pleasant thing that holds itself up and I become attached. I have a concrete thing I think holds itself up that I don't like, and I push it away. So when there's something concrete I like that's not really concrete, it's a misapprehension, but you see how this kind of disastrous thinking creates more disastrous thinking. There's a thinking that this thing inherently exists. So there's a thinking that it could be pleasant or unpleasant inherently. And then if it's concretely pleasant or concretely unpleasant, then it makes sense for me to either run at it or push it away. And because I'm doing all of that, I'm creating karma. I have an intention, and then my body and my speech do their thing. And these contaminated actions, because they're driven by afflictions, coarse afflictions, and then inappropriate attention, and the self-grasping ignorance is this evil mastermind. Because these are contaminated actions that I end up doing, even if they're virtuous actions, if they come from self-grasping ignorance, they're causes for cyclic existence, if they haven't been purified by emptiness. So everything that I am doing, driven by the misapprehension of reality, causes more lack of happiness, more suffering, and more dissatisfaction. So the Buddha came to show us these facts that I've been for almost 30 years trying to decipher. And I have to say, I spent hours today still, this many years later, trying to identify the object of negation, trying to see what in the various texts by Lama Tsongkhapa and Janja Rilpi Dorje and so forth, and Genpal Dendrapa Rinpoche, what these texts have to say about the object of negation and how I perceive things around me, and how the innate self-grasping ignorance is what I've really got to figure out. I've got to figure out that the innate self-grasping ignorance is grasping at the self of person and phenomena as being intrinsically existent, as being able to hold itself up without, without any kind of supports whatsoever. And for the Prasangika at a conventional level, it's merely imputed conventions, basically, on a basis of, not on an independence, on a basis of designation, just imputed conventions, imputed conceptual conventions. Not all conceptual thought is bad, because there's a conceptual thought that tallies with reality. But the way that we believe in conventional truth is that it truly exists, and that these conventions are what they appear to be if we were to even subject them to ultimate analysis. And the rest of the world doesn't walk around saying things inherently exist. There's just the way that we naturally go about things. But when you start to study these things, you'll see your mind start to quake a little bit and start to see that, oh, wait a second, the way that I go about my day is kind of screwed up, because it's coming from a place that is concealing or veiling what is real. And this is what we need to fix. And the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge comes to show us that things don't inherently exist. When we subject things to ultimate analysis, we'll find that we have a non-finding of inherent existence, And then when we recognize, when we come out of ultimate analysis that things do exist, we have to recognize that if they don't exist objectively, they exist subjectively, merely designated in dependence upon a collection that serves as a basis of designation, and that there's no object that can be found separate from a designating consciousness. There's nothing that once we look at, could something exist and be established right within the object, we see that there is nothing from the side of the object that can be established as such. And if there's still an object there, when we look at conventional truth, we have to say that it's just subjectively, conventionally existent. Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha monks and a great gathering of the Sangha Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature, form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness, thus Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind, conscious, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth. Since there is no deception, the Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teatong gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thou Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita, just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world, with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. And really, if you hear anything about emptiness, if you're able to hear the Buddha's, what the Buddha taught as ultimate truth, just rejoice. Even if you don't fully comprehend it, you're among a very rare amount of beings, human beings, billions of beings, 8 billion beings almost, I guess, that think about how many would be able to start to understand that things exist subjectively and that they don't exist from their own side. And in Chandrakirti's clear words, it talks about during these times of quarrel in the world. So I guess it's not just right now in 2024 when there was quarreling going on in the world, and talking about the degenerate times of the days. Chandrakirti is in clear words. And he says, during these times when there's so much quarrel in the world and, the essential points are really missing, anybody who has even a moment's kind of, understanding of these subjects, it's really, really fortunate. And Arya Deva says that, those with little merit won't even have a doubt about the nature of reality. And anyone who even has a doubt about whether things inherently exist or not, basically, will tear samsara to pieces. Just that doubt starts to create an earthquake. Sometimes will create an earthquake. I've seen it in commentaries that shakes samsara or tears it to pieces. Or so just think and recognize and rejoice in the fact that you've been presented with these teachings on the perfection of wisdom teachings and the Mahayana teachings and the stages of the path to enlightenment teachings, because this is what the Buddha came to the world to show us about, is how to discover our own, happiness that won't end, that'll be bliss to bliss to bliss, our own wisdom that'll be perfect, how to achieve complete reliability to be able to help others, and be able to free them from suffering. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. We're in the section on bodhicitta, in the foundation of all good qualities, and we'll do the kind of primer for that. And we've done some primer for it in the intro. I wanted to kind of combine some of it with the intro, because when you invite sentient beings, you're using this mind that you've matured through these practices. So anytime that I can do some personal instruction around that may or may not be helpful, I go for it. Kala jibe ne jodan ba ne ngushe du ju nga yi du do jen dru ba ba la ma yi bu shin zi ne sun kan ro so la sha zelo aga samar be aga samara ja shanda samara be samara. Aga samara ja shanda samara ya be de ya dong gati para sanga de budi zo ba ba kon chun ji gai de me do ji she lo ba do ji me ba do ji she wa do ji ja gi ba ji me de be je dan ji je den ko ye so ha. 别人真家这就是我的，没对你为真当着我的，等保证金本尊这这句，这是这样等到的来说。扎西别吉西西没多扎，里拉林吉尼的肩膀的三界心都弥的有阿吉这个难道心拉就罢休。接着那么当把艰难的结结个了，见在真真的。je ta sambe du je sima la sa je ju ji cha ba ba du so idang guru ratna mandala gam niratayami. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by teaching, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to abandon all views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Okay, here we are. Thank you so much, everyone, for your kind listening. Let's get right to the source of all my good, the foundation of all good qualities, because I know we don't have a lot of time. And I'd like to get into this and, talk a little bit about bodhicitta. So we'll start with the beginning of the source of all my good. And we know that Pabunka Rinpoche says the source of all my good is broken down into 4 categories. First category is the very root of the path, is the teacher. How to find a teacher, the kind of teacher you should find, and how to serve him or her properly. So here, the source of all my good is this first stanza, and Pabunka Rinpoche's commentary says this is the first category. The source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. And here we look for what the qualities of a teacher are, and we find in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara the excellent qualities of the teacher, the 10 qualities that are found. And then we found in the Tantra requested by Sabahu various other qualities that are found, and how we can kind of gauge whether or not a teacher is qualified to teach the material, and whether or not we should listen to them. And there's different levels of teacher. We need to understand, just because we're listening to a lecture doesn't mean we've taken someone on as a teacher. We can look at it like a professorial level, or the next level, we could look at it the kind of perfection vehicle level, where we see them as a holy being that we would put in the merit field. And then in the tantric level, where we would see them as inseparable from the deity and try to make them, their mind, one with our mind. But that's not what we're trying to accomplish tonight. Here, I'm trying to give you information, just like a teacher would, just like a spiritual friend would, because I've been given information by my holy teacher, my root guru, that I find has been effective for my mind, and it's information that's compatible to any sentient being's mind, because it's a teaching for beings of three capacities and encompasses everything all the way up, everything one needs to know, no matter where they are at on a spiritual path to progress. So we look for a teacher who can present all of the stages of the path to enlightenment, who has qualities better than us, has ethics, has concentration, has wisdom, etc., as found in this Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. Check for those 10 qualities. And then see, do you need all 10, etc. You can find this in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment on relying on a spiritual guide. Then the next section gets into what you do once you've found a teacher, and this is the second category for Pabunko Rinpoche. What do you do once you found a teacher? And then we have the preliminary practices. The finding the teacher is a preliminary practice, and then a preliminary practice of this idea of this life of leisure and opportunity that we found, and the need to take the essence of it. Bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. So here in this section, here it says the 8 leisures. So we look at what those 8 leisures are in the commentaries, and then we look in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. We find the 10 endowments also, and the inner endowments and the outer endowments, and we look to see which ones we have, which ones we don't have, and we'll find that we have all 8 leisures, and we have most of among the 10 qualities, the 10 endowments. And if we have all of these things, it means that we have a basis that's ready to practice spiritual pathways, a basis that's ready to be a religious practitioner, a Buddhist practitioner. And if that's the case, it means that we can figure out how to not have lower realm rebirths. It means that, and use this basis from which to make that happen, figure out how to not have rebirth ever again in cyclic existence, and use this basis from which to figure out that and to end all rebirth in cyclic existence. And this basis that we have, because we have the kind of basis that we have, we can use it to transform this basis that's impure into a pure basis of a Buddha, because we have the teachings that will show us how to do it. And in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, after the teaching on the life of leisure and an endowment, we find the kind of overview of the teachings for beings of three capacities to show us what we can do with this basis. That's, as it says here, bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I've found just this once is ever so hard to find, ever so valuable. It's so valuable because we can engage in these practices. It's so hard to find when we look at the Lam Rim. The causes are hard to make it. There's so many reasons when we look at examples why it's hard to find. And the numbers of beings who have this religious basis, this basis to practice the Dharma from, are very, very small, and will be in that category of beings that don't have a basis to practice the Dharma in our future lives if we don't seize this moment. Carpe diem, seize the day, seize this moment, as Gontan Dembe Drome says, to try to every moment leave a virtuous imprint in your mind, leave a wisdom, be a wise moment instead of an unwise moment. My body but the problem here is that if we could live forever until we were Buddhas in this basis, it would be fine, but that's not the case. We are going to die. And when we die, what projects us will be how our mind is at the time of death. What projects us into our next kind of birth will really, our mind at death is going to matter. And what we've done in our life is going to matter. And those virtuous and non-virtuous habituations that we've engaged in are really going to matter. And so we recognize that the time to do something is now, as Guntan Drembe Drome says, in this moment. Why in this moment and not in 100 moments from now? Is because my body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first to recall the death that will destroy me soon. 3 points. Death will come and nothing can stop it. I don't know when I'm going to die. And the only thing that when I die that will help me is Dharma. And help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Those non-virtuous deeds I've done will be planted in my consciousness and ready to ripen into projection, or ready to ripen into some sort of a acquired situation. Those non-virtuous deeds I've done will ripen into suffering. Those virtuous deeds I've done will ripen into happiness. And when we look at white in here, it's referring to virtue, and black referring to non-virtue. It's a way that they also present in scripture, virtue and non-virtue. And what those deeds will bring to me follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Karma that's been planted will stay there and will be certain to ripen. You won't experience others' karma, but you will experience your own karma, and it follows close behind as certain as your shadow, and it's magnifying. And while it's magnifying, it's certainly going to ripen if there isn't an opponent force to stop it from ripening. So there's this certainty that there's these deeds that you've planted, these seeds you've planted in your mind, and they will ripen into experience of some sort. Then, since you know this, grant me to ever be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. So knowing that these deeds that you do now, you don't like suffering, right? You like happiness, right? Well, what you do now is going to be the future, will be what happens. So it makes no sense for you to engage in non-virtue if what is going to happen when you engage in non-virtue, that it plants a seed in your consciousness that just kind of lingers there like an arrow that's in the air just waiting to shoot at a target when the causes and conditions are there for it to reach its final destination of a result of happiness or suffering, dependent upon what the concordant cause is. So we know that if suffering is caused by non-virtue, we should stop non-virtue. If happiness is caused by virtue, we should engage in virtue. It says, the Buddha said, abandon evil, engage in perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha from the Vinaya Sutra. And then we recognize that the lower, in this section of the small scope, we recognize the lower realms of cyclic existence are plagued with suffering, that when I die, the things I've done, what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind. We need to try to create a position where we aren't born into hell, hungry ghost, or animal realm. So we engage in the teachings for beings of small capacity, or shared in common with beings of small capacity, if we're looking at it as an integrated path, in order to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence, in order to have a basis in our future life to be able to continue on our path, if we're looking at it in terms of an integrated path. And knowing that we also want the excellent, high status, excellent qualities of the Buddha's beautiful bodies and so forth. So we engage in these things of the small scope so that they can be purified. These contaminated virtues we're engaging in could be purified and ripen into those qualities of a Buddha. So we're doing like the concrete work for Buddhahood in this small scope. But we're really in the small scope. If the person's just only looking at small scope, they're only looking to have good future rebirths. And then the next level, the practitioner says, well, how is all of cyclic existence? How really is the higher realm? How really is it if you're a human or a god? Is it something that is a permanent situation? Is it something that I can be sure I'll always get, is another point. Okay, so next life I'll be a human, or da 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 da. What about the one after that? What about the one after that and the one after that? How do I keep this thing that's so difficult to achieve, easily lost, and causes are hard to make it? And there's, how do I make this thing keep happening? Am I so sure I can make this keep happening? And if it does keep happening, what kind of position will I be in? I'll be in a position where, when we look at this section, we find in the presentation of the Four Noble Truths and the 12 links of dependent origination, and we find that I'm in a position where I have among the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, the 3 types of suffering. So I have this in cyclic existence. No matter where I am, I have at a minimum the pervasive compounded suffering. So here we recognize that the things we normally think are good, the higher realms of cyclic existence, the happiness, the thing that contaminated happiness causes, the things that immutable karma, contaminated karmas that cause, we look at the thing that we think we want, and we think is happiness, and we recognize it's just the bait that keeps us in samsara. It's really just a contaminated happiness that's truly the suffering of change. And this happiness that I think I'm going to achieve is not satisfying. It isn't happiness, it isn't freedom from suffering, and it is dissatisfying. And what does Tsongkhapa say about this medium scope, where we start to recognize the downfalls of all cyclic existence and generate renunciation, not of just the lower realms of cyclic existence, but the higher realms of cyclic existence too? The reasoning is to bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Happiness of freedom here is referring to liberation. The happiness of freedom is true happiness, an uncontaminated happiness, one that is not within samsara, one where there's a freedom from being forced into a set of among the four or five aggregates beyond our control because of contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their corresponding seeds, driven by self-grasping ignorance. We want to be liberated, free from, and here we're learning to renounce suffering. We're not renouncing happiness. This is another wrong teaching that people give about Buddhism. You've got to renounce all of your happiness. No, you're renouncing your suffering and renouncing contaminated happiness. That is suffering. Bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They're the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. So now for ourselves, we've recognized the downfalls of cyclic existence. We've looked at all of the types of suffering that we can have: the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the suffering of meeting with the unpleasant, the suffering of separating from what is pleasant, the suffering of not getting what you want, the suffering of these appropriated aggregates of body and mind that we're forced into, that have to endure among these various types of suffering, at a minimum, the pervasive compounded suffering and the three types of suffering. So we recognize the six types of suffering, the uncertainty of cyclic existence, and these loved ones that we have. I mean, we may end up murdering in our future lives and end up eating them if we eat meat and they are born as a cow. And we look at this gross, disgusting uncertainty of cyclic existence. And we look at this rebirth that we have to take on over and over again, and the insatiability that I spoke about cyclic existence. And we even, when we recognize that there's nowhere within the six realms of a cyclic existence, from the lowest hell to the peak of existence, where we don't have to have some kind of a dissatisfying state, meaning that it will transform into something more unpleasant in the future. So we have this dissatisfaction. And the worst part about it is that we have everything that we could want, seemingly, and all these creature comforts, but we will still probably have an iPhone 20 in a few years because we're not satisfied. And we have to shuck off these bodies over and over again. And when we do, we go to the high realm and the low realm. And this is samsara. This lack of freedom is misery. And all the while, when we're doing this transition, we're all alone. And then we're acquiring these things we think are friends and enemies, and then we're all alone. Friends become nothing, enemies come nothing. Why do we grasp at these things as being so important, when the only thing at the end of our lives, when we're dying, that's going to help us and that will project us into something we're looking for is the Dharma? So we recognize this for ourselves, and we see that we have this suffering of suffering, this coarse suffering that goes on, and headaches, and all these kind of coarser things that we just mentioned. And then the more subtle things, the contaminated happiness that we have that changes into suffering. We're hot and we go into a cold room and we're satisfied for a moment, and then we're cold and need to go outside. We walk and say, oh, it's so pleasant taking a walk, and then our legs hurt and we want to sit down. And then when we sit down, we feel the pleasant nature of it, and then suddenly we don't want to sit down any longer because we're bored and we have to get up. We're just in this constant state of seeking something which isn't a state of satisfaction, and we're finding it over and over and over again, seemingly in something that is just bait that keeps us from actually being happy. Wow. This is what we do day and night. We do all the wrong stuff to get happiness. We do all the wrong stuff to be free from suffering. And if we just opened the books and we studied and started to have the wisdom arisen from hearing, contemplation, and meditation, then we could actually be happy and start to have the disturbed states of our minds go away. With a sigh of relief, we recognize that we can achieve this freedom. And now what Pabunka Rinpoche says is you take all of this information that you just got about yourself. You take all of this suffering and hardship that you know that your mind has undergone since beginningless time in various forms, in various shapes that you've taken on within cyclic existence. That since beginningless time, you've been over and over and over again dissatisfied and scared and had to suffer immense amounts of suffering, as I said at the beginning of the class, that you've never even imagined. And you've had happiness that you can't even imagine, and it was just bait. If you think you can find something in cyclic existence that's going to make you happy, you're missing the point that Buddha came to tell you. And that's that true happiness is not the suffering of change, is not an addiction to a meditative concentration state like in the formless realm. That misses the point that they're still grasping. The innate grasping at true existence is there. And if that's there, there's something that's going to start up samsara and make karma project. So you turn this idea about what you know about your kind of work of suffering and fear that's gone on in cyclic existence, and then you start to turn towards the person you love the most, and you say, wow, just like myself, I want to be free from suffering, and I want happiness as much as I can have. And I have a way to do that. I know it's because of self-grasping ignorance. I know it's because I think things exist inherently. I think the self of person and self of phenomena exist inherently. And I definitely want to get out of cyclic existence because I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of being sick. Tired of people dying. I'm tired of having everything I've ever wanted ripped from my being, ripped away from my hands. I'm tired of this. And this feeling of desperation and dissatisfaction is what every single sentient being is undergoing. And you turn this your reality towards other beings, and you see the person that you love the most and know that they have self-grasping ignorance. They don't know that they have self-grasping ignorance. The only way that they're not going to have the 8, 6, and 3 sufferings again is if they understand the truth of suchness. And you start to understand that just like you, and then you spread it out to other loved ones, and then strangers, and then even people you find difficulty with, all have been as kind to you if you do the Lamrim meditation as the person that's sitting right next to you. You've just merely forgotten. And you want that person that's sitting next to you to have this same nectar, this same chance, this same freedom. And then you get to this idea that is taught in the Mahayana that says, who in this universe could really show all beings exactly what they need to know? I don't know exactly what the person that I love necessarily needs to know. They may not even be a Buddhist. They may not even be able to speak the same kind of thing as me. I'm trapped in cyclic existence. I don't really have a way to help them. This is a disturbing state of mind for me too. So even if I had freedom from suffering, I somehow just like see the person that I love so much just fade off into the sunset and then have these same types of suffering that I have to have and that I've learned so much about. This is the kind of meditation that you do, where you can't bear the idea that the person that you love so much doesn't have a way out. and you don't know exactly how to help them. It's only an omniscient being that knows how to help all sentient beings. And when you start to stretch it out to beings that you don't even know where they exist in the universe, that have been as kind to you, if you do the Lamrim meditation, as the person who you love more than anything in this world, you would have to be omniscient to help them. And when you start to see that your happiness, in a real way, when you're honest with yourself, is dependent upon other beings, even the highest states of happiness that you've really had were times where there was a love involved, where there was a compassion involved, some exhilaration involved. The highest ones you've had, seeing a baby born, your baby born, or having a love for someone else where you would be willing to do anything. You would put that person's needs before your own. That feeling that's generated is such a wholer feeling than the self-cherishing attitude, which doesn't look towards anyone but yourself. Admit it. Admit it's a lighter feeling. Admit it's a wholer feeling. And imagine if that feeling spread to the entire universe of beings, what kind of whole feeling that would be. And that's why an arhat, who's a hearer, a foe destroyer, doesn't have complete satisfaction, hasn't completed their own needs, because they don't have that whole feeling of love for every single sentient being in the universe, and a wish to become a Buddha for the sake of them, a wish to show them how to discover exactly what they need in order to go from bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss, just like a Buddha. So we'll learn as the days progress. We're going to end here, but we'll learn about how we would make this come about. So I'm just going to read the stanza here. I've slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into, and grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the three moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the Bodhisattva vows. And lastly, from Lama Tsongkhapa's Three Principal Paths, just to kind of summarize what I said about taking your own understanding in the medium scope, the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, where you develop renunciation, a desire to emerge from cyclic existence. You have a distaste, you find cyclic existence disgusting. You turn it to others and you recognize that you turn it to compassion and you want them, just like you want yourself to be free from suffering and have happiness, you want them to have it, and you'll eventually get it to be as strong as your wish for yourself to have it. And that's amazing. So what does it say? It says also, if this thought definitely to leave cyclic existence, so renunciation, this day and night wanting to leave cyclic existence, if this thought isn't conjoined with generation of a complete aspiration to highest enlightenment, bodhicitta, it does not become a cause of the marvelous bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Bodhicitta is the door to the Mahayana. Thus, the intelligence should generate the supreme altruistic intention to become enlightened. All ordinary beings are carried by the continuum of the four powerful currents, birth, aging, sickness, and death, are tied with the tight bonds of actions difficult to oppose, have entered into the iron net of apprehending self, inherent existence, are completely beclouded with the thick darkness of ignorance, like an iron cage that's not allowing you to see, that's veiling the way things truly are born into cyclic existence limitlessly, sentient beings are, and in their births are tortured ceaselessly by the three sufferings, suffering of suffering, suffering of change, pervasive compounded suffering. Thinking thus of the condition of mothers who have come to such a state, generate the supreme altruistic intention to become enlightened. Amazing we have this information. I'm so grateful to be able to share it with you. I hope everybody's mind is virtuous at this moment and can reflect further on these teachings and figure out how to integrate them into your life, and figure out how to generate renunciation, bodhicitta, the correct view of emptiness, how to generate a renunciation related to the lower realms of cyclic existence, and learn how to engage in ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, and going for refuge, and then acknowledging one's downfalls and applying the 4 opponent powers if you've engaged in negativity. And how to engage in the 3 highest higher trainings of the ethics, concentration, and wisdom, and develop renunciation for all of cyclic existence, and then eventually develop, bodhicitta, and couple that with the wisdom realizing emptiness so that you can, realize ultimate bodhicitta as a bodhisattva and then traverse the 10 bodhisattva grounds. And I wish that for everyone. I hope that everybody's mind can be made less and less disturbed by these teachings, and eventually reach the state of non-disturbance, and absolute complete satisfaction. And when I say complete satisfaction, I mean a place where not only the afflictive obstructions are removed, but also the obstructions to omniscience that keep you from an enlightened state, where one is able to have perfect love, compassion, skillful means, wisdom, etc., and really be the most reliable guide in the universe. So with that being said, the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Zashi beji jushi medo dran rira linji ni de jembadi zanje shindu mi de oji royo nanda shin la je vasho dagi jini zabe ge wa de dendan dro wa gon la gambendan Jeba Jetsun Lo Zandra Pa Yi Tembe Nimbo Rindu Zejejo Idanguru Radna Mandala Gani Ratayami. Any mistakes I've made, I apologize. I didn't make them on purpose. They were just out of ignorance, and may your minds be purified of them. And I don't remember making any, but if I did, I apologize, and may they be purified by Vajrasattva mantra. Om benza sata zamaya manavalaya benza sata zina bajita. Deva meva vazu the guy meva vazu bugai meva anurag meva zavazini me Vajrasattva comes that you make it jim guru ma bhagavan zarvatata gata benza ma mimma benza baba ma zamaya sapa ahum fate. And when I say mistakes that I've made, also because I'm not omniscient, I don't know everyone that's listening to this teaching. I'm on all platforms, and this will be on YouTube. So a mistake might have been saying something that wasn't to the capacity that I could have said it, so that you could evolve and mature, so that your proliferating Buddha nature can mature to the state of perfection. So this is what we also mean. And may we always be protected by Paul the Lama, who Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche said was our protector. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and help for beings, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara ends. Ganri rawe kowe jinjan de bendan de wa malu zhongwei ne genri zi wan denzin Yatso yi shabezi de badu enjoji. A prayer of supplication for Namgyo Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche to swiftly return and help us all. And also remembering Geshe Lobsang Gompo Rinpoche, and remembering Jeffrey Hopkins, again, Nenden Jambel Drapa Rinpoche, in the supplication to please return and help elucidate the truth of suchness, so that we can discover renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk. So this is a prayer I composed for Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche. Homage to Kensei Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend, who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of three capacities. Now the sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone, for your kind listening. I look forward to seeing you next week. And don't forget that John Bok Yi will be teaching Tsongkhapa's interpretation of the object of negation in Svatantrika Madhyamaka this Sunday, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And you can sign right up on the Shravasti Abbey website, free registration, and it's a series in memory of Jeffrey Hopkins. It's the Jeffrey Hopkins Legacy Series, 11 speakers on 11 Sundays, and I encourage you all to check it out because there's a wealth of incredible information. Professor Donald Lopez Jr. has already spoke. Professor Guy Newland has spoken. Professor Anne Klein Lama Rigzin Dromala has spoken, and this week we have Professor John Bok Yi speaking, and we're so fortunate. He's a great Madhyamaka scholar. And yeah, this is the information that we're going to need if we want to be free from cyclic existence and achieve the state of Buddhahood. No matter what, either of those two goals are going to require the Prasangika view, and we get there by way of understanding the staircase of tenets. And right before Prasangika, we find Svatantrika Madhyamaka, the middle way autonomy school. Okay, it's enough out of me. See you next time. Hope your mind is virtuous as much as possible this week, because that's all that matters.